Please be aware, in this podcast series we talk about all areas of safeguarding, which some people may find upsetting. So please make sure you're okay listening to today's topic. Be mindful of those around you, such as children, that you might not want to listen in. Hi, I'm SSS Safeguarding Director Sam Preston.
And I'm former head teacher and content author Sara Spinks.
Hello and welcome to Safeguarding Conversations. Today we're discussing one of the biggest and most uncomfortable public debates currently taking place across the UK, how the justice system should respond when serious sexual offences are committed by children or young teenagers. And the debate's intensified following the recent Hampshire case involving 3 teenage boys convicted of raping 2 girls, where the original court imposed non-custodial youth rehabilitation orders rather than detention. The case has since been referred to the Court of Appeal following widespread public concern and political reaction. So today we want to explore a difficult question. How do you deliver justice for victims, properly punish offenders, protect the public, and still try to rehabilitate young offenders? So Sara, this is one of those issues where there really are no easy answers, are there?
No, not at all. And for me, I think we start, that starting point has to be the victims. So whatever a case like this appears, whenever it appears in the media, there's often immediate debate about sentencing policy, rehabilitation age, or the future of the offender. But we must not lose sight of the fact that there are victims whose lives may be permanently altered. In this case, the girls were reportedly threatened, assaulted, filmed, and humiliated. Some of the assaults were shared digitally, and that creates layers of trauma, such as the original offence, the loss of control, fear, shame, public exposure, and the ongoing psychological impact. And I think for many victims, justice is partly about being believed, partly about safety, but also about seeing society recognise the seriousness of what happened to them. And when a sentence appears too lenient, many victims interpret that as, was what happened to me really taken seriously?
Yes, and I think that was one of the views, one of the girls who remains anonymous, that was pretty much her reaction. And yet the sentencing judge clearly viewed rehabilitation as central. The court heard that the boys were very young, had developmental and cognitive difficulties, that there were concerns about criminalising children too early. And that reflects a long-standing principle in youth justice. Children are still developing emotionally, neurologically, and socially. So the system is supposed to ask, can this child change? Can risk be reduced? And can future harm be prevented? Because if the answer is yes, then society benefits if rehabilitation works.
But this is where the tension becomes really real, because the public response to this case has been overwhelmingly emotional and angry. Many people feel that rape is such a serious offence that custody should be automatic, regardless of age. And part of that reaction is linked to confidence, I think, in the youth system, in that justice system. People want reassurance that sexual violence is treated seriously, that women and girls are protected and offenders are held accountable. If the public feels that punishment does not reflect the gravity of the crime, then confidence in the justice system, it starts to weaken. And this is one reason the case has now been referred to the Court of Appeal under the Unduly Lenient Sentence Scheme.
I just want to add a bit of caution here, though, Sara, that when we talk about the public, really, because of course, with online and social media content, the views expressed there are only the section of the public that engage with such platforms and indeed are personal and can often be ill-informed by misinformation. I'm not saying that that's happening in this case. I'm just adding a little sort of bit of caution in there when we're reflecting on how do we measure what the public thinks. So I think perhaps the real question that we should be focusing on is, do punishment and rehabilitation have to compete with each other? Because sometimes public debate frames it as either punish offenders or rehabilitate them. But effective justice systems usually try to do both. So a sentence can acknowledge harm, impose consequences, restrict liberty, protect the public, and still attempt rehabilitation. And in youth justice, especially, the challenge is trying to prevent a teenager from becoming a lifelong dangerous adult offender.
Yeah, and modern youth justice is heavily influenced by developmental science. We know that teenagers are more impulsive, they're more influenced by peers, less able to assess long-term consequences, and emotionally less mature than adults. We know that. But this does not excuse offending. But it does affect how risk and future behaviour are understood, I think. The concern with youth justice is that purely punitive systems can sometimes increase future offending. If young people leave custody more angry, more traumatized, more disconnected, and more criminalized, society may actually become less safe long term. But, and I think this is really important, rehabilitation only works if there is genuine accountability and meaningful intervention. Rehabilitation is not doing nothing.
Yeah. And we also have to consider the current state of youth rehabilitation services here, Sarah, don't we? Because there's problems with staff retention and recruitment, underfunding, long periods of solitary confinement, and poor educational outcomes, all of which do not set young people on a positive future pathway. And another important aspect in this case is the digital element. Reports suggest that some of the assaults were filmed and shared, and that raises wider safeguarding concerns around online misogyny, peer validation, pornography exposure, desensitization, and technology-assisted harmful sexual behaviour. Increasingly, professionals are asking what cultural influences are shaping young people's understanding of consent, relationships, and sexual behaviour. Because some young offenders are themselves growing up immersed in environments where humiliation becomes entertainment, violence is normalised, and online status is linked to shock value. So none of that removes responsibility. But it does matter if we genuinely want prevention.
Yeah, and justice itself means different things to different people, doesn't it? For some victims, justice means imprisonment. For others, it means being heard, being protected, not being blamed, seeing offenders admit responsibility, or knowing it won't happen to someone else. Meanwhile, society also expects justice systems to reduce reoffending, protect communities, and create safer futures. I think the difficulty, that difficult reality is that sometimes those aims pull in different directions.
Yeah, they do. And this case has become much bigger than one sentencing decision. It's triggered a national debate about sentencing policy, youth justice, violence against women and girls, rehabilitation, and public confidence in the courts. And there's growing political discussion nationally about whether sentencing frameworks are shifting too far towards non-custodial approaches in some serious offences. At the same time, youth justice professionals warn against abandoning rehabilitation entirely because of public anger in individual cases.
And I think perhaps the uncomfortable truth is this: there may never be a perfect answer in cases like this.
Yeah.
A justice system has to hold multiple responsibilities at once. It has to hold responsibilities for justice for victims, accountability for offenders, public protection, rehabilitation, and long-term prevention. And sometimes no outcome will feel fully satisfactory to everyone. But what matters is that the system listens to victims, takes sexual violence seriously, intervenes early, understands risks, and I think works relentlessly, to prevent future harm. Because if safeguarding is not only about responding after abuse happens, it's not. It's also about stopping future abuse from happening at all.
Absolutely. So thanks for listening. Today's discussion highlights really just how complex youth justice, safeguarding and rehabilitation really are, especially when serious harm has occurred. As the Court of Appeal now reviews the Hampshire case, the wider national debate about punishment, rehabilitation and public confidence in the justice system is likely to continue. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.